Does one become enlightened by imagining beings of light, like fantasizing, or by making their own darkness conscious? I'm Kerry Blaser, the Divine Feminine. My soul's name is Sophia. I'm the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. And the main reason I'm here is to share my free ebook linked below, my 6 Divine Feminine self-love strategies to help teach you how to transform your emotional wounds into personal wisdom. Please like and subscribe to my channel and help me blow up my channel so I can distribute my ebook. So collectively, we can use self-love to create heaven on earth. We live in a holographic universe. So what we have in our hearts is projected externally so we can see ourselves. Carl Jung, I used a Carl Jung quote in the beginning. I'll show you in a minute. We use that to see ourselves for self-improvement. We project through our heart's a vortex, onto the quantum field. We see ourselves, and there we have self-improvement. Like when I notice selfishness outside of myself, that is my soul showing me my own selfishness. So let's learn the difference between opening your heart to your emotional pain and then transforming that into wisdom and knowledge. The difference between that process and what it does to the body and how it heals trauma versus imagining beings of light, fantasizing about being someplace else, or a being of light saving you. Okay, let's dive into this one. It's an after school special, and I just love school after school. They have such great artwork, and it's beautiful.
He'll do great things, that boy. That's what the village people said about him. Strong, coordinated, talented, smart and charming, the young man felt as though he could become anything he wanted. He stood tall with his shoulders back, and his blue eyes spoke of a steady self-confidence held deep within him. His body was strong, built tough through hours of intensive sword training. After endless hours of sword practice, he began to stroll through the village, back to his home. A number of girls waved to him as he walked by, and he politely waved back. Upon arriving home, he began sharpening his swords, ready for training the next day. Suddenly, a spirit appeared behind him, calling his name. The young man spun around, ready to attack, only to find an incredibly plain-looking spirit floating harmlessly in the center of his room. Neither male nor female, the spirit held an entirely blank expression, neither happy nor sad, as though there was no emotion inside of it whatsoever. The spirit spoke, "Jean of Furthershaw, I am the spirit of seeing." The young man stood facing the spirit confrontationally. "What do you want?" he said, drawing his sword. The spirit remained completely unafraid. "Only to show you my powers. I can show you anything you can possibly imagine, for I am the spirit of seeing," the spirit replied plainly. The young man observed the spirit carefully. It continued to float passively in the air and seemed to pose no threat. "You can show me anything, huh? Show me the stables of Furthershaw," the young man said curiously. The spirit blew a puff of smoke, and inside the smoke, the stables could be seen clearly. The image of the stables hung in the air for several minutes before disappearing. The young man smiled. "How interesting," he thought to himself. Another idea immediately came to his mind. "Show me the most beautiful girl in the world," he suggested, with a smirk on his face. Without a word, the spirit blew another puff of smoke, and in it appeared the most beautiful girl the young man had ever seen. Her long, dark hair lay delicately over her pretty head. She had big, piercing brown eyes, a delicate nose, and plump lips. One hand lay perfectly on the hips of her gorgeous, hourglass figure. The young man's pupils dilated as he stared at the girl in wonder for a full 5 minutes. Remembering where he was, he cleared his throat and composed himself once again. While he felt slightly embarrassed, the spirit maintained an empty gaze, seemingly unaffected by the young man's embarrassing display. Another idea entered the young man's mind. "Show me a great warrior," he commanded. As usual, the spirit blew yet another puff of smoke with an image of exactly what the young man had asked for. The perfect warrior stood looking into the distance, his body toned and muscular, with a stern expression on his face. The young man marveled at this great warrior, pledging to himself that he too would one day be a great warrior just like this man. The young man had had enough. "You may now leave, spirit. I have seen enough," he said, dismissively, as he went back to sharpening his swords. The spirit of seeing spoke without emotion. "I shall remain here, in the corner of your room, ready to show you my powers on your command." The young man shrugged his shoulders in acceptance. The spirit didn't seem to mean him any harm. As the weeks went by, the young man became accustomed to the spirit in his room. He used it to see the weather of the day, to see what his friends were doing, and he even started looking at beautiful girls with their clothing removed. After all, the spirit of seeing would show him anything he wanted. The weeks turned into months. He started leaving his sword training an hour early, and then 2 hours early, and then 3. For the spirit of seeing was far more stimulating than dull, repetitive sword training.
Why he never asked the spirit to see what he's capable of. Why he was so focused on what's external to him to see. And why didn't he want to see himself? And then we see what happens. The more he focuses on the external, the less internal drive he has.
The girls in the village waved, but the young man stopped waving back. They were plain, he said to himself. One day, he would find a girl as beautiful as the ones he watched through the spirit, he thought. He began using the spirit to watch great battles. He cheered aloud as his favorite hero turned the tide of the skirmish at the very last minute, watching with eagerness, thinking that one day soon, he would lead his own army into battle. He thought of these battles while he practiced his sword work. He even began reciting lines he had heard his favorite hero speak as he swung. And he would leave training after just a few hours to rush home and watch a great battle. Not before seeing more beautiful naked girls, of course. A year passed, and the girls in the village had stopped waving. Some had wedded a husband. Most could be heard screaming the name of another boy in the village from the archery range each evening. Apparently, he was skilled with a bow. The young man cursed and muttered under his breath, something about real warriors not attacking from afar. He now trained only for a few short hours, and some days he would skip training altogether. He would walk at a quick pace through the village to get home, uninterested in exchanging pleasantries with the village folk. He had begun using the spirit to watch a number of beautiful naked women perform sexual acts on one another. It seemed now that a single naked woman was no longer interesting. His admiration for his favorite hero had turned into jealousy. He would watch the hero defeat enemy after enemy, the gap between himself and the hero seeming to loom ever
is he becoming
larger.
a better version of himself by focusing on other people and what they can do? Or was he becoming a better version of himself by focusing on what he can do and what's inside of his soul? Does he become better by comparing himself? Does he become better by fantasizing about activities with these women that aren't possible where he lives? What creates a healthy, grounded person?
He could no longer run much of a distance. His shield felt heavy. His sword skills no longer matched other warriors of his own age. Several more years passed. The young man had given up on becoming a hero. Although he would still rewatch his favorite battles through the spirit from time to time, still unmarried, he had become deeply frustrated and sad. His sword lay quietly in the corner of the room, collecting dust. On the night of his 30th birthday, the man, nearing the end of his youth, sat alone in his room, feeling worse than he had ever felt. The clock struck 12. Suddenly, the spirit of seeing began to laugh. The man was startled. The spirit had never laughed before. In fact, it had never shown any emotion whatsoever. He looked up at the spirit, who caught his gaze. Slowly, the spirit of seeing grew a wide smile. For the first time in 10 years, the spirit spoke. "My work here is done," it said in a deep voice. "What are you talking about, spirit?" the man spoke, fearfully. The spirit laughed again. "I shall reveal what I have kept secret for the past 10 years. I am the ultimate concentration of evil. I am the root of all the darkness in this world. I am the devil himself," the spirit spoke pridefully. The man became terrified, his mouth wide open and speechless. "A demon will attack this village tonight. A prophecy foretold that you were the one destined to defeat it. But it is I that has defeated you. And now the souls of this village are mine," the spirit spoke with the tone of utter glee. "Why wait 10 long years?" the man asked in a shaky voice. "Why not fight me face to face the first time we met?" The spirit let out another laugh. "If I had fought you face to face, you would have conquered me. But I am cunning, and that slow drip of poison given to you through the means of endless fantasy has rendered you too weak to fight."
Carl Jung
And
says one
this
does
village
not
is
become
mine.
enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making their darkness conscious. Inside of our shadow, inside of our subconscious, is just a treasure trove, a toolbox of self-confidence, self-belief, and self-love. And when we pull from ourself and we make a more complete whole self, that's fulfillment, because then we have constant access to it. But when I only have access to an event through a screen or through someone else, that's super codependent, and that's not me. And you could see how much he fought himself. He stopped being productive so that he could spend time fantasizing about things that happen that he doesn't do outside of himself, an external locus of control. But when he had an internal locus of control, all the girls were attracted to him. He was working out every day. He was doing his thing. But when the spirit showed up, an external locus of control, that's where the codependency comes in. That's where the addiction comes in. That's where the lack of authenticity gets repressed.
The man could do nothing other than slowly sit down. A deep, dark pain settled inside his stomach, one that he knew would never go away. Only the devil himself could inflict the deep, tormenting, inner anguish he felt pulsing through his mind. The torture in his mind was too much to bear. He needed something to quell the pain. "Can I see those beautiful girls just one more time?" A wide grin grew across the devil's face. "Always."
Wow. Hell is the place where the person you are meets the person you could have been. And I hope that doesn't happen to you. I had to face myself in a huge way last year. I mean, accepting that I'm the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. Like, what? Like, who? Like, what? I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies. I speak Chinese. I learned classical Chinese. I met my ex-husband in Tibet. He's Israeli. He was part of the entourage escorting Itzhak Rabin to Beijing in 1993, and I met him 2 weeks later in Tibet. And then there's a plethora of other signs and synchronicities. But if I had been imagining, like there's other people that claim it, and the first time I interacted with her, I didn't know she claimed it. My intuition said, "Oh, center all the signs and synchronicities." I'm like, okay, last summer of 2025. Then later I found that out. But I don't spend time imagining if I could be this or if I could be that or if I could be, because I dive into myself and I know who I am. I did act like that. And let's get into that with Dr. Gabor Mate. He's got a great clip that I'll share that shows this challenge that we get into when we cannot express our authentic selves. So let me share, and then we'll listen to him.
Where the attachment need is not compatible with the need for authenticity. In other words, if I'm authentic, my parents will reject me. If I feel what I feel and express what I feel and insist on my own truth, my parents can't handle it. And parents convey those messages unconsciously all the time. Not because they mean to, not because they don't love the child, not because they're not trying to do their best, but because they themselves are suppressed or traumatized or hurt or stressed. And what does the child do with that? Well, if I give up my attachment for the sake of authenticity, I lose my relationships on which my life depends. Therefore, there's no question. What becomes suppressed is our authenticity, our emotions. And then we become 25 and 30 or 35, 40, and we don't know who we are. What happens to it?
That's exactly what they just showed. When you focus on being like other people, when you have an external locus of control, like I did, very mentally ill, a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of mental health challenges, migraines, couldn't sleep, failed relationships, you name it, I had it. I have a suicide attempt. Okay, that's how mentally ill I was. Because when I was a child, I was not able to express my authentic self, and I developed addictions. I was mostly like, yes, I had some eating problems, maybe some shopping problems, but I had an alone addiction because I didn't know how to have relationships. But Dr. Gabor Mate, who we just saw, has a great after-school video, another after-school video, I know, but on addiction and how that happens for kids, because what we saw in Chris Williamson's narration of the first after-school video is a tale on how addictions are formed. But now Dr. Mate, who specializes in how childhood trauma impacts adults, can teach us how addiction is created and helping teach you what's necessary to heal from it. My 6 Divine Feminine self-love strategies in my ebook, link below, will really help you. The meditation and shamanic drumming video on my YouTube channel will help you. My other videos will help you. Watch Dr. Gabor Mate. He'll help you as well. But let's get to his video from after school because it's so informative.
So an addiction is a complex psychological, physiological process, but which manifests in any behavior that a person enjoys, finds relief in, and therefore craves in the short term, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and doesn't give up despite the negative consequences. So craving pleasure, relief in the short term, negative consequences in the long term, inability to give it up. Now, notice
That's exactly what we just saw in the other after school video. Exactly what we just saw. The boy was easily manipulated into spending his whole day fantasizing about things happening outside of himself as opposed to developing his own self. And then he didn't have a self.
I has said nothing about substances. I said any behavior. So it could be related to cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, whatever. Could also be sex, gambling, internet, relationships, shopping, eating, work, extreme sports, working out, pornography, any number of human activities. So I said any behavior. Now, the official definition of addiction, according to the American Society for Addiction Medicine, is that this is it's a primary brain disorder. It arises in the brain, largely due to genetic reasons. This is how they see it. And I say
That's not
just not
true.
true.
Based on Albert Einstein, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, meaning the energy field controls the particle. The field of epigenetics, a newer scientific field, epi meaning before genetics, has proven that less than 1% of our diseases come from our genetics. Yet AA, the main Alcoholics Anonymous, teaches that it's a genetic disorder. So it's trauma. It's stored in your soul. That's why it's important to learn how to operate your soul, because only you have sovereignty over your own soul, and only you have sovereignty over yourself, your soul. And my 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies, that free ebook, is the perfect guide for you to start learning how to operate your soul. So what expresses out of your soul through your heart, and then that's what communicates to your body which hormones to release. When I'm expressing tons of love, then I release oxytocin and healthy hormones. When I'm constantly producing fear in my soul because of my childhood trauma that's unprocessed, then I over communicate fear to my brain because the heart sends far more signals to the brain than the other way around. And then the brain overproduces cortisol. An abundance of cortisol in your bloodstream for an extended period of time increases the blood sugar levels, so you're ready for fight and flight. But when those blood sugar levels stay high, that fuels inflammation, and more than 90% of our diseases come from inflammation, especially heart disease. Cancer, that's an inflammation disease. So let's think about where we're going to spend our time. We're going to spend our time focusing on our body, or are we going to listen to Albert Einstein, who said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The field meaning the energy field, the soul. Particle meaning the body. I'll let you decide.
The other popular idea about addiction is that it's a choice that somebody makes, that people choose to be addicted, which is what the legal system is based on. Because if people are not choosing, what are we punishing them for? And although I think the medical definition is closer to the truth, I don't see it as genetic. It's a genetic disorder, and I don't see it as a primary brain disorder. So let me perhaps show you why, if that's okay. A human being has two fundamental needs, apart from the physical needs in infancy, in childhood. One is for attachment. Now, attachment is the closeness and proximity with another human being for the sake of being looked after, or for the sake of looking after the other. Now, human beings, as mammals, and even birds, are creatures of attachment. We have to connect and attach because otherwise we don't survive. If there's nobody that's motivated to take care of us, to attach to us that way, and if not motivated to attach to others, we just can't survive. One of the interesting things is that the endorphins, which are the body's internal opiate chemicals, which heroin and all the other opiates resemble, they help to facilitate attachment. So if you take infant mice and you knock out their endorphin receptors so they don't have endorphin opiate activity in their brain, they won't cry for help and separate from their mothers, which would mean that they would die in the wild. And which goes back to what happens in childhood when there's stress and trauma, these endorphin systems don't develop. And then when people do heroin, it feels like a warm, soft hug to them. They feel love and connection for the first time. That's why it's so powerful. But so we have this need for attachment, which obviously the human infant, who's the most helpless, the most dependent, the least mature of any creature in the universe at birth, cannot survive without the attachment. And that attachment relationship, given that we have the longest period of development of any creature, well into adolescence and beyond, attachment is not a negotiable need. But we have another need, which is authenticity. Now, authenticity, auto the self, means being connected to ourselves, just knowing what we feel and being able to act on it. So that means our gut feelings. So let's look at how human beings evolved. For hundreds of thousands of years, and for 100,000 years or so of this species existing on Earth, how did we live? We didn't live in cities and houses and so on. We lived out there in the wild.
We lived our authentic selves.
In human...
we were authentic, so we were healthy. We just got to figure out how to be authentic living in a city. How do we do that? We're still figuring it out.
Existence. Now, just how long do you survive in the wild if you're not connected to your gut feelings? Not very long. If you start using your intellect instead of your gut feelings, you just don't survive. So that's a powerful survival need as well. So attachment is a survival need. Authenticity is a survival need. But what happens if your authenticity threatens your attachment relationships? For example, as a 2-year-old, you get angry because you didn't get that cookie before dinner. But your parents can't handle anger because they grew up in homes when there was rageaholicism and they're terrified at the very expression of anger. So they give you the message that good little kids don't get angry. The message you receive is not that good little kids don't get angry, but that angry little kids don't get loved. Because your parents are now sullen, they won't look at you, they talk to you in a harsh way, you're not getting loved. Not experiencing love at that moment. No. But you got to stay attached. Guess what you're going to suppress? The authenticity every time. And this is how we lose connection to ourselves and to our gut feelings. So that, strangely enough, that very dynamic, which is essential for human survival in a natural setting, not becomes a threat to our survival in this more modern setting, where to stay authentic is to threaten attachment. And
just
so
like
we
you
give up
said
our
in his short, and
authenticity,
I'll
and then
end
we
it
wonder
here.
who the hell we are and
You
whose
know,
life is this.
The Industrial Revolution created schools so that we could create more workers, not so we could create more geniuses. There was a study done in the 1960s that started in the 1960s, showed that 95% of 5-year-olds, their pattern recognition skills put them at a genius level. By the time those same kids graduated high school, only 5% were still geniuses. When I went to high school, it was all rote memorization and regurgitation on a test. There was no critical thinking. The main reason I got into East Asian religious studies is the teacher taught critical thinking. And we have a loneliness epidemic. So I'm going to leave you with a Carl Jung quote that gets into this next to the video from Dr. Gabor Mate. I forgot that I had it here. But it says, loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views that others find inadmissible. That is lack of authenticity. That's, when we focus on indoctrination, outside in learning, like trans kids was indoctrination. I mean, how can that be natural and healthy when we only were able to do surgery over the past 100 years? And now that whole kind of hysteria has died down, I mean, we're down, trans kids are down by like 75% since 2023. We're not seeing businesses support it anymore. It was social hysteria based on fear. Oh, what if they commit suicide? They might, even though there's no studies that commit suicide. Fear-based decision-making leads us to our demise. Heart-based decision-making in the long run leads us to our survival and our thriving. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. Please check out my free ebook below. Please like and subscribe and check out my other videos for more help on transforming your own emotional wounds into personal wisdom. Because one does not become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making their own darkness conscious, by revealing the wisdom and the knowledge inside of their own soul, by learning to operate their own soul. My free ebook will help you below. All right, take care. Bye.